I was sitting on the couch when my partner Mike said casually, "I'm taking a guys' trip to Miami this weekend. You're not invited." He didn't look up from his phone, just dropped it into the room like it was nothing. I blinked once. "Okay," I said, "have a great time." That finally made him glance at me. A quick look, surprised, almost disappointed. "That's it? You're not upset?" "Why would I be?" I replied evenly. "If you want a guys' weekend, go have fun." We'd been together for 4 years, living together for 2. Trips were usually something we talked about, planned together, or at least mentioned before suitcases came out. This wasn't a conversation. It was an announcement. The next morning, Mike packed fast. Clothes scattered across the bed, shoes lined up neatly. Too many outfits for a short trip. Sneakers he usually saved for nights out. Cologne. Grooming stuff he normally forgot unless it mattered. I noticed the details without commenting. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to be that girlfriend. I drove him to the airport, a quick kiss, goodbye. "Try not to burn the apartment down," he joked, slinging his bag over his shoulder. I smiled and watched him disappear through the sliding doors. Back home, I ordered takeout, settled onto the couch, and queued up shows I'd been meaning to watch. I remember thinking the quiet might be nice, a rare weekend alone, space to breathe. Then Saturday morning came. My phone rang early. "Hi, sweetheart," his mom said cheerfully. "Just checking. What time are you two landing? I've got the rental house all set." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Landing? Where?" There was a pause. "The beach house," she said slowly. "For your couple's weekend. Mike told me you were both flying down today. We're celebrating your anniversary early." My heart dropped into my stomach. "He told me it was a boys' trip," I said carefully, "and that I wasn't invited." Silence. Then very softly, "Oh." That single word changed everything, because that wasn't confusion. It was realization. I stared at the blank wall in front of me, pulse loud in my ears, knowing, before I even hung up, that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a lie. Before Miami, before the lie cracked open everything, Mike and I had a history that felt solid. Not flashy, not cinematic, just steady in a way I'd trusted. We met through mutual friends, the kind of introduction that comes with no expectations. One group dinner, a few jokes across the table, a conversation that lingered after everyone else drifted away. Mike was easy to talk to, confident without being loud, attentive in a way that made me feel seen, not studied. When he asked for my number, it felt natural, not rushed. Our relationship grew the same way, gradually. We dated for 2 years before moving in together. By then, routines had formed. Sunday grocery runs, takeout nights when neither of us felt like cooking, mornings where he'd steal my coffee mug because he swore mine tasted better. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Trust came easily to me with him. He wasn't the jealous type, never questioned where I went or who I talked to. I took that as maturity, as security. I told myself that was what a healthy relationship looked like, 2 people choosing each other without surveillance. His family welcomed me quickly. His mom checked in often, always warm, always asking when she'd see us next. Family dinners were loud, overlapping conversations, teasing that crossed into affection. I wasn't an outsider there. I was included, accepted. When his parents talked about the future, they spoke in plurals. "You two, your plans, when you guys..." Living together made everything feel more official. The apartment became ours. Shared furniture, shared expenses, shared life. My name was on the lease. I handled most of the logistics. Mike covered his share, but I was the planner, the organizer, the one who remembered dates and details. It didn't feel like imbalance at the time. It felt like compatibility. Looking back, there were small things I brushed past. Mike could be oddly private with his phone. Not secretive enough to raise alarms, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. He talked about his past lightly, selectively, especially when it came to his ex. He'd mentioned her in passing once or twice. College relationship. Long distance didn't work. Nothing dramatic. Nothing unresolved, according to him. I believe that. Trips were usually joint decisions, even short ones, a conversation, a calendar check. That's why the Miami announcement felt strange. Not alarming yet, just unfamiliar, out of character. Mike wasn't impulsive. He didn't book last-minute getaways without at least mentioning them first. But trust has a way of smoothing over friction. I told myself I was overthinking. that I didn't want to be the kind of partner who needed explanations for everything. I'd seen friends lose relationships that way, death by suspicion. So when Mike said guys' trip, I chose calm. I chose confidence. I chose not to interrogate the moment. Because up until then, there had been no reason not to. 4 years together teaches you patterns, teaches you what to expect. It teaches you how someone moves through the world when they're honest with you. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't see yet, was that Miami wasn't a deviation from his pattern. It was the first time I was close enough to see the cracks. The first signs didn't arrive as alarms. They came as pauses. Small hesitations that didn't belong anywhere specific, so my mind filed them away instead of confronting them head on. It started with Mike's phone. Not the obvious kind of secrecy, the sudden lock screen, the flinch when you walk by. It was subtler than that. Notifications silenced more often. The screen angled just slightly away from me on the couch. Texts answered with his back turned, voice lowered, when he stepped onto the balcony to take calls. If I asked who it was, he'd answer easily. Just a friend. Group chat stuff. Work nonsense. Nothing defensive, nothing sharp. And that was the problem. There was no single moment I could point to and say, this is it. Our conversation shifted too, though I couldn't have explained how at the time. He listened, but less. Responded, but with shorter answers. When I talked about my day, he nodded, eyes flicking back to his phone. When I asked about his, he summarized instead of sharing. I told myself this was normal. People go through phases, stress, distraction. I didn't want to become the girlfriend who read meaning into every silence. Then there was the name. He didn't say it often, almost never. But once, while telling a story about college, he mentioned his ex in passing. Casual, almost careless. No emotion attached, no weight. Yeah, she moved to Miami last year, he said, like he was mentioning the weather. Miami. I remember the way the word lingered in the air for half a second longer than it should have. I didn't react, didn't ask questions. He didn't elaborate. The conversation moved on. Still, the timing stuck with me. When the guy's trip came up a few days later, my brain made the connection before I could stop it, and then immediately dismissed it. Coincidence. Plenty of people live in Miami. I wasn't about to accuse my partner of anything based on geography. But the planning didn't add up. He was suddenly busy, running errands at odd hours, talking about logistics that never fully materialized. When I asked who he was going with, he listed names I recognized, friends I'd met before, but details stayed vague. Where are you staying? An Airbnb. Which one? I don't know. One of the guys booked it. Normally, Mike loved specifics, addresses, schedules, backup plans. This version of him floated through questions without anchoring to anything concrete. The night before he left, he seemed restless, checking his phone more than usual, laughing quietly at messages he didn't share. When I asked what was funny, he smiled and shook his head. Nothing, he said, just group chat chaos. I watched him pack the next morning, noticing what he chose to bring and what he didn't. The effort he put into his appearance. The care. It wasn't wrong, just intentional in a way I hadn't seen recently. At the airport, when we hugged goodbye, something felt unfinished, like a sentence cut off mid-thought. You're sure you're okay? He asked. I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. At least I thought I did. I didn't check his phone. I didn't follow him on social media obsessively. I didn't text to monitor his movements. I trusted him. What I didn't realize was that trust had already been quietly exploited, weeks earlier, while I was still assuming honesty was the default. The lie hadn't begun with Miami. Miami was just where it was finally going to surface. Saturday morning started quietly. Too quietly. The apartment felt hollow without Mike. No humming from the shower, no clatter of keys, no half-finished coffee abandoned on the counter. I was still in pajamas when my phone rang. Hi, sweetheart, Diane said brightly. Mike's mom. Just checking. What time are you two landing? I've got the rental house ready. The word landing snagged in my chest. Landing? Where? I asked. There was a pause on the line, the kind that stretches when someone realizes they might be holding the wrong version of a story. The beach house, Diane said slowly. For your couple's weekend? Mike told me you were both flying down today. We're celebrating your anniversary early. I even invited some family. I sat up, heart ticking faster. He told me it was a guy's trip, I said carefully, and that I wasn't invited. Silence, then a measured breath. Oh, Diane said. It wasn't confusion, it was recalculation. Let me call you back, she added, her voice gentler now. When the call ended, the room felt smaller. I stood there for a moment, phone pressed to my palm, replaying the last 2 days. The announcement, the rushed packing, the airport goodbye. None of it had sounded urgent. None of it had sounded like a lie that needed this many moving parts. I opened Instagram without really deciding to. Stories flicked past. Pools, cocktails, neon signs. A familiar circle popped up, one of Mike's friends. The first clip looked normal enough. Laughing, music, a crowded bar. Then I noticed the background of the next story. A woman's arm looped around Mike's waist. Casual, intimate. I recognized the bracelet immediately. Thin gold chain, small charm. I'd seen it before, years ago, in old photos Mike had scrolled past too quickly. Danielle. My stomach dipped. I watched the clip again, slower. Her hair, the tilt of her head toward his shoulder, the way he leaned in without thinking. This wasn't a coincidence caught on camera. It was familiarity. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. My hands just went cold. Mike's laptop was still on the dining table where he'd left it the night before. I stared at it, arguing with myself. Crossing this line would change something. There was no undo button once I did. But there was already no undoing the lie. I opened the laptop. He hadn't logged out. The group chat sat right there, labeled something harmless. Miami crew. I opened it and felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't a guy's trip. It was Mike, 2 of his friends, their girlfriends, and Danielle. 3 couples, planned weeks in advance. I scrolled back. 3 weeks, then 4. Messages stacked on messages, Airbnb links, table reservations, beach party plans. Danielle's name threaded through everything like it belonged there. Then I saw it. A message from Mike, 2 days before he left. Sophia thinks it's just a guy's trip. LOL, she bought it. Another from a friend. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. And Danielle, later that night, seeing you again is going to be crazy. My chest tightened. This wasn't messy. It wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. I took screenshots. Every page, every message. I didn't rush. I didn't miss anything. When I finished, my hands were shaking, but my mind felt strangely clear. I called Diane back. She answered immediately. Did you figure out what's going on? Yes, I said, and I'm so sorry you're finding out this way. I told her the truth, calmly, plainly. That Mike had told me it was a guy's trip, that Danielle was there, that he'd been planning it for weeks. I have screenshots, I added, if you want them. Send them, Diane said. Her voice went cold. Now. I sent everything. Minutes passed. Then my phone rang again. I'm handling this, Diane said. Do not do anything yet. Let me take care of it. I hung up and stared at the blank screen, heart racing. Mike hadn't called, hadn't texted, not once. While I was uncovering the truth, he was still in Miami, laughing, drinking, pretending the lie was holding. It wasn't. And the moment I pressed send, the story stopped being his to control. After I sent the screenshots, the apartment went eerily still. I sat on the edge of the couch, phone resting in my palm, staring at nothing. My heart was racing, but my thoughts were sharp, too sharp for panic. Shock had a way of doing that, sanding emotion down to something clean and cold. Mike didn't call. Minutes passed, then more. I checked the time without meaning to. He was 3 hours behind, still early there, still sleeping maybe, still laughing, still unaware that the lie he'd been standing on had already started to collapse. I replayed the messages in my head. Not the words, but the tone. She bought it. The casual cruelty of it. The way my name had become a punchline in a chat I didn't know existed. My phone buzzed. Not him. Diane. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. None of this is okay. I raised him better than this. I stared at the text for a long moment before replying. I know. I didn't want you finding out this way. A typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Please don't do anything yet, she wrote. Let me handle this. I set the phone down and stood up, pacing the length of the living room. Every object felt suddenly foreign, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. His shoes by the door, his jacket slung over the chair, the framed photo on the shelf from a trip we'd taken 2 summers ago, him smiling, arm around my shoulders, looking straight into the camera like there was nothing to hide. I picked it up, studied it, then placed it face down. The phone rang an hour later. Mike. I let it ring once, twice. On the 3rd ring, I answered. What the hell did you do? He demanded, voice already raised. Hi, I said calmly. My mom is calling me, my aunt is texting me, and I wake up to a family group chat full of screenshots. You went through my messages? I told your mom the truth, I replied. That's all. You violated my privacy, he snapped. You had no right. You lied to me, I cut in. My voice didn't waver. For weeks, to my face. It was a guy's trip, he said quickly. Too quickly. Danielle just happened to be there. We're friends now. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I closed my eyes, inhaled slowly. I saw the group chat, Mike. Silence. The one where you laughed about lying to me, I continued. The one where you planned this for weeks. The one where you said, I bought it. The pause on the line stretched. I could hear his breathing, uneven now. You went digging, he said finally. That's controlling, Sophia. That's insecure. I checked because nothing you told me lined up, I said. And it turns out I was right. You're embarrassing me, he shot back. You sent those screenshots to my mom. Do you have any idea what you've done? I told her the truth, I repeated. If the truth embarrasses you, that's not my problem. He exhaled sharply. This is insane. You're ruining my trip. I thought it was a guy's trip, I said. Shouldn't be much to ruin. He didn't answer. Mike, I added, quieter now, were you ever going to tell me? Another pause, longer this time. We didn't do anything, he said. Not yet. And we wouldn't have. You're acting like I cheated. You planned a secret trip with your ex and lied to me about it, I said. Call it whatever helps you sleep. That's not fair, he snapped. Danielle means nothing. She meant enough to plan around me, I said. Enough to laugh about deceiving me. His voice dropped. You're overreacting. Something in me settled then. A clarity I hadn't expected. No, I said. I'm reacting appropriately. He started talking again. Fast, defensive, words tumbling over each other. Privacy, trust, mistakes. How stressed he'd been. How complicated things were. I didn't interrupt. When he finally stopped, I said, We'll talk when you get back. We're talking now, he insisted. You can't just... I can, I said, and I am. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking when I set the phone down, but my chest felt lighter, like something heavy had finally been named and set aside. I wasn't screaming, I wasn't crying, I wasn't begging. For the first time since Miami entered my life, I wasn't reacting to Mike at all. I was preparing for myself. The silence after I hung up on Mike didn't last. It shattered. My phone began buzzing in uneven bursts. Texts, missed calls, notifications stacking faster than I could read them. I muted the sound and set the phone face down on the coffee table, pressing my palms against it like that might slow everything down. It didn't. The first message I opened was from Elena, Mike's sister. What is happening? Mom just dropped screenshots into the family group chat. Dad is furious. I typed back slowly. I only sent them to Diane. A few seconds passed. Yeah, she didn't keep them private, Elena replied. I didn't need clarification. When I opened Instagram again, my chest tightened, not with panic, but with something colder. Diane had posted everything. Not hints, not vague accusations, screenshots, names visible, timestamps intact. Mike's messages laughing about lying to me. The planning. Danielle's presence woven through the entire trip. She tagged Mike. She tagged the friends. She even tagged Danielle. The caption was short and devastating. When your child lies to everyone, takes money meant for a family trip, and sneaks around with his ex while his partner of 4 years sits at home, I raised him better than this. Disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. The response was immediate. People didn't debate. They recognized the pattern. This wasn't a mistake. You planned it. Team Sophia. Actions have consequences. My phone started ringing again. Mike. I didn't answer. Voicemails piled up instead. His voice cycling through anger, disbelief, panic. You had no right to do this. My mom is humiliating me. You blew this way out of proportion. Please, just pick up. I let them sit unheard. Then something else happened. A new story appeared, this one not from Danielle. It was from her current partner. I recognized him only vaguely from old photos Mike had once scrolled past without comment. His story was a single black screen at first, white text centered. Finding out your girlfriend has been secretly planning a trip with her ex for months on Instagram isn't how I imagine my weekend. The next slide was worse. Screenshots. Messages between him and Danielle. His confusion. Her explanations unraveling in real time. Her admission that she'd been talking to Mike for months. That Miami wasn't spontaneous. That it was planned to finally see each other again. My stomach dropped, not in shock, but in grim confirmation. The truth was spreading now, independent of me. Comments exploded. People connected dots quickly. Someone reposted Diane's screenshots. Someone else reposted Danielle's partner's story. The narrative locked into place. Danielle went silent. Her profile disappeared within an hour. Mike, on the other hand, went loud. He posted a long rant, white text on a dark background, about privacy, betrayal, and boundaries. He accused me of being controlling, claimed his family was toxic, said everyone was overreacting to an innocent trip with friends. The comments were brutal. You lied for weeks. Receipts are public. You don't get to play victim now. Even one of the guys from the trip tried to step in, posting something vague about misunderstandings and things getting out of hand. It only fueled the fire. Then my phone rang again. This time it was Richard. Mike's dad didn't soften his tone. Sophia, he said, I want you to know we're on your side. I swallowed. I never wanted this to blow up. You didn't cause it, he replied. He did. We canceled his credit cards. He's responsible for getting himself home. I closed my eyes. One more thing, Richard added. The apartment. You're the only one on the lease, right? Yes. Good. Change the locks, he said. I'll cover it. You don't have to. I insist, he cut in. My son made his choices. By Sunday morning, Miami had fully collapsed. The Airbnb was canceled, booked on one of the cards Richard shut down. Stories from the trip stopped abruptly. No more clubs, no more drinks, just silence and vague complaints about travel issues. Mike's calls changed tone. Tears, apologies, promises. I messed up, okay? One voicemail said. But this went too far. We can fix this when I get back. I didn't respond. Instead, I started packing. Not angrily, methodically. Boxes lined up, clothes folded, shoes paired. Everything that belonged to him placed neatly inside, labeled and sealed. Each box felt like a decision being finalized. By evening, the apartment looked different. Quieter, lighter, like it was finally exhaling. Mike called again. I let it go to voicemail, because by then, escalation wasn't something that was happening to me anymore. It was something I was actively stepping out of. Sunday night settled in heavy and slow. The apartment was quiet in a way that pressed against my ears. No phone buzzing, no notifications lighting up the screen, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock above the kitchen doorway. I sat on the floor among half-stacked boxes, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the space where Mike's shoes used to be. This was the part no one talks about. Not the confrontation, not the public fallout, not the righteous anger that comes with proof. This was the aftermath, when the adrenaline drains out and leaves only the weight. For the first time since Saturday morning, I let myself feel it. 4 years doesn't disappear just because the truth finally shows up. It lingers in muscle memory, in habits, in the way I still expected to hear his key in the lock around this time of night, in the instinct to turn and comment on something stupid on TV before remembering there was no one to comment to. I pressed my palm flat against the floor, grounding myself. My hands were still trembling. The phone rang. Mike. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed almost immediately. Sophia. His voice cracked. Not angry this time. Please. I'm outside the Airbnb. I don't have anywhere to go. My cards don't work. I just need to talk to you. I closed my eyes. Another voicemail came in. I know I screwed up. I know it looks bad, but I swear nothing happened. Danielle and I didn't do anything. You have to believe me. The words hit harder than the anger had. Nothing happened. As if weeks of lying didn't count. As if planning a secret trip with his ex wasn't already a betrayal. As if intent didn't matter unless it ended in something physical. I stood up too fast, dizziness washing over me, and leaned against the counter until it passed. This was the dark part, the part where doubt tries to claw its way back in, where your brain starts bargaining against your own boundaries. Maybe he didn't cheat, maybe you're being too harsh, maybe this could still be salvaged. I hated that part of myself, the one trained to soften sharp truths, the one that looked for exits when the door should stay closed. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. We need to talk when I get home. Not an apology, not accountability, a negotiation. I set the phone down and walked through the apartment slowly, taking inventory of everything that felt different now. The couch where he'd sat when he announced the trip, the counter where his laptop had been left behind, the dining table where I'd stood, heart pounding, while reading messages never meant for me. Each memory layered on the next until my chest ached. The hardest realization wasn't that Mike had lied. It was that he'd been comfortable doing it. Comfortable enough to joke about it, to plan around me, to assume I wouldn't question him, that I'd stay in my lane and play my part while he lived a separate truth. That was the moment something in me finally cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. I picked up the framed photo from the shelf, the one from 2 summers ago, his arm around me, both of us smiling. I studied it for a long time, searching for the person I thought I knew. Then I turned it face down and slid it into a box. The phone rang again. This time I answered. "What do you want, Mike?" I asked. "I just got a flight," he said quickly. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk then, face to face, like adults." My stomach tightened. "There's nothing to talk about." "There is," he insisted. "You can't just throw everything away over this." "Over what?" I asked. "The lie, the planning, the screenshots, or the part where you laughed about deceiving me?" He went quiet. "You're making this worse than it is," he said finally. "You let my mom humiliate me. You let everyone turn against me." "I didn't make you lie," I said, "and I didn't make you get caught." "You're really going to lock me out?" he asked, voice sharpening. "After everything?" The entitlement in his tone was unmistakable. "I'm not discussing logistics over the phone," I replied. "We'll talk later." "When?" he demanded. "After you land," I said, "and only if there's something left to say." I hung up before he could respond. I sank back onto the floor, back against the couch, and stared at the ceiling. Tears finally slipped free. Not for him, but for the version of myself who had trusted without hesitation. This was the lowest point. The moment where the future felt uncertain and the past felt poisoned, where everything familiar had been stripped away, and I was left sitting in the wreckage of a truth I hadn't asked for. But somewhere beneath the ache, something steadied. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't waiting for clarity. The dark moment wasn't about losing Mike. It was about finally seeing him and realizing I could not unsee it. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded in layers, quiet, methodical, unavoidable. Mike's credit cards stopped working before the day was over. Richard didn't announce it publicly. He didn't threaten. He simply cut access. The result was immediate. Hotel bookings failed. Rideshare payments declined. The illusion of options vanished. Mike left a string of voicemails I didn't answer, his voice tight with irritation more than fear, as if the universe had inconvenienced him unfairly. By the next morning, I stopped listening altogether. I wasn't the one managing consequences anymore. He texted once, short and sharp. "I'll come get my stuff." I replied with a single sentence. "Coordinate pickup through your family." That was it. 2 days later, Antonio showed up at the building. Mike's brother looked uncomfortable standing there, hands in his pockets, eyes flicking anywhere but at me. I'd stacked the boxes neatly outside my door, everything labeled, sealed, accounted for. No dramatics, no surprises. "Hey," he said quietly, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this." "I'm not," I replied honestly. "Not anymore." He nodded, relieved by the simplicity. As he loaded the last box onto a cart, he hesitated. "For what it's worth," he said, lowering his voice, "the whole family knows he screwed up. Mom's done covering for him." I thanked him, and when the elevator doors closed, something in my chest loosened. The apartment felt final then, empty in a way that meant finished, not lost. Mike went to his parents' house next. It didn't last. Diane called me a few days later, not to update me, but to apologize. Again. She sounded exhausted, the way people do when they've reached the end of their patience. "He keeps spinning the story," she said, "still saying you overreacted, still blaming everyone else." I listened silent. "The last straw," she continued, "was when I caught him trying to sell some of Richard's things. Not jewelry, we moved that years ago, but a watch, a couple of collectibles he knew mattered." My stomach tightened, not in shock, but recognition. "He said he needed cash to get back on his feet," Diane said. "I told him no, he tried anyway." There was a pause. I asked him to leave. I didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't expect it. "I told him we're done enabling this," she added. "He needs to learn what consequences feel like." He tried Danielle next. I only knew because Elena told me later. He'd messaged, called, asked if he could crash for a few nights, maybe borrow some money. Danielle never responded. Whether she couldn't or wouldn't didn't matter. The person he'd risked everything for was suddenly unavailable when things got inconvenient. The silence was loud. The rest of the Miami crew didn't fare much better. One of Mike's friends was dumped outright when his girlfriend realized she'd been lied to about the nature of the trip. Another couple went on a break that everyone knew was permanent. The group chat, the one that started all of this, was deleted, but not before screenshots leaked into corners of the internet Mike couldn't control. Friendships imploded, blame ricocheted, no one walked away clean. By the end of the week, Mike had nowhere steady to land. A night on a friend's couch, A cheap motel paid for with borrowed cash. He showed up late to work, missed deadlines, started getting warnings from his manager. Stress bled into everything. Consequences stacked. Eventually, the city ran out of patience. With no money, no housing, no family safety net, Mike did the only thing left. He went back to his hometown, not as a reset, as a retreat, quietly, without announcements. His social media went dark except for the occasional vague quote about betrayal or growth that fooled no one. I heard all of this secondhand, from Elena, from mutual friends, from the echo chamber of a story that no longer belonged to me. And I didn't step in, because the most important thing I learned through all of this wasn't about Mike. It was about restraint. I didn't punish him. I didn't scheme. I didn't retaliate. I told the truth, set boundaries, and stepped aside. The rest happened on its own. By the time the dust settled, the pattern was clear, even to him, I imagine. When you lie long enough, loudly enough, eventually there's no one left willing to believe you. When you plan around someone like they're invisible, one day you realize you've made yourself disposable. Mike played stupid games, and he won exactly the prizes those games offered. By the time the noise finally faded, my life felt quieter in a way that made sense. The apartment was mine again, not just legally, but emotionally. I rearranged the furniture, boxed up the last few things that still carried Mike's imprint, and donated what I didn't want to keep. I kept the routines that belonged to me. Morning coffee by the window, evening walks without checking my phone. The space stopped feeling like something I had to defend and started feeling like something I could rest inside. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because weeks of being lied to, laughed about even, does something subtle to your sense of reality. It makes you second-guess your instincts. Therapy helped me name that for what it was. Gaslighting doesn't need shouting to be damaging. Sometimes it's quiet, casual, framed as jokes in a group chat you were never meant to see. Learning to trust myself again was work, but it was honest work. Mike's family didn't disappear from my life the way I expected them to. Diane and Richard checked in, gently. Not to mediate, not to convince me of anything, just to ask how I was doing, to say they were sorry, to say they understood why I'd drawn the line where I did. Their clarity mattered more than I realized at the time. Elena kept texting too, memes mostly, the kind that said, "I'm on your side," without making a production of it. She never tried to explain her brother away. She didn't ask me to soften anything. She treated me like a person who had been wronged, not a problem to manage. Mike's brother reached out once, privately. It was respectful, careful. He told me he admired how I handled everything, that I hadn't turned it into a spectacle, even when it easily could have been. He said the family had always thought highly of me, that he was sorry his brother hadn't been able to meet that standard. There was warmth there, and sincerity, but nothing crossed a line. It didn't need to. The point wasn't replacement, it was recognition. When Thanksgiving came up, Diane and Richard invited me. Elena echoed it. So did Mike's brother, in a message that made it clear there was no pressure, just an open seat if I wanted it. I thanked them. I meant it, and I declined. Not because I was angry, not because it hurt, but because that chapter had ended, and I didn't need to keep a foot in it to prove anything. Boundaries don't have to be dramatic to be firm. Life kept moving. Weeks later, on a quiet afternoon, I met someone new at a bookstore. It wasn't cinematic. No sparks flying across the room. We talked about a novel we both loved and ended up getting coffee down the street. We took it slow. No declarations. No rush to define anything. On our second coffee date, the Miami story came up. I told it plainly, without embellishment. When I finished, he stared at me for a beat, then laughed. Not at me, but at the sheer audacity of it. "Wait," he said, eyes wide. "He said he was willing to forgive you?" I laughed too, and that's when I knew something important had shifted. I could tell the story without my chest tightening, without my hands shaking, without needing the listener to validate what I already understood. That mattered. A few days after that, I got one final message from a number I didn't recognize. It was Mike. He said he was in therapy, that he finally understood what he'd lost, that he was sorry. He didn't ask for anything, didn't suggest we talk, just said he wanted me to know. I didn't respond. I didn't block him either. The message sat there, not as an invitation, but as a marker, proof that the arc had completed itself without my involvement. Closure doesn't always arrive the way you expect. Sometimes it shows up quietly, after you've already moved on. Looking back now, I understand that the betrayal wasn't Miami. It wasn't Danielle. It wasn't even the screenshots. It was the ease with which Mike chose to lie, and the comfort he felt assuming I'd never notice. That was the line. Once crossed, it couldn't be uncrossed. I didn't punish him. I didn't chase accountability. I told the truth, drew boundaries, and stepped aside. The rest unfolded on its own. People often ask what the lesson is in stories like this. I don't think it's about being stronger or smarter or more suspicious. It's simpler than that. When someone plans a lie and laughs about it, they've already made a choice. When you set a boundary and walk away, you're not being cruel, you're being honest. And sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge or confrontation. It's refusal. Refusal to explain yourself to someone who already understands. Refusal to manage consequences that don't belong to you. Refusal to stay where respect has already left the room. Mike played stupid games. He won exactly the prizes those games offered. I chose something else.